Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sue Santa, Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Legal Affairs at the Council on Foundations. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for Washington Update Live, Philanthropy's Voice in the Policy Process. It's great to have so many of you joining us on an August afternoon. I know a lot of folks are away on vacation, including one of our participants who's joining us from the beach, but that's all the better. I just wanted to go through first quickly a couple of housekeeping items, introduce our speakers, and then give you some brief context before we will turn to one of our special guests. So with the questions, those of you who've participated in our webinars before know that you can submit questions by typing them into the questions box. And we will take those questions here at Council on Foundation Central, and we will read those to the participants. You can submit your questions at any time during the webinar. If by chance we do not get to your question, what we have always done is respond to you afterward, either by phone or with an email. So please know that your questions are heard, and if you certainly want to get them all answered, sometimes we just end up with more questions than we have time for. Well, this afternoon, we're really thrilled to have a panel of speakers on our webinar that are going to lay out for all of us not only what's going on right now, but really essentially the importance of raising your voice with your elected officials at this time. As many of you know, we have a program here called Activate in August, where we really encourage folks to be meeting up with their members of Congress during this time when they're home, and this year is just as important as any year. So in this call, as soon as I am done providing context, you're actually going to hear from one of our special guests, Congressman Steve Cohen, who serves the 9th District in Tennessee and who is a Philanthropy Caucus member. I just want everybody to know we're going a little out of order here because the Congressman is not immune to the travel woes that many of us have, and he was caught in the Delta kerfuffle, and he is actually joining us from the airport, but has a little bit of a limited time, so we are so grateful to have him on the call. In addition to the Congressman, my two wonderful colleagues are going to be joining us, Hador, our Vice President for Public Policy, and Serena Jazor, who's our Associate Director of Public Policy, and they will each be talking about both context and then some of the nuts and bolts of activating in August. And then finally, I am delighted that Adina Hill, the Manager of Public Policy and Special Projects from the Southeastern Council on Foundations, is joining us. Adina is such a wonderful, close colleague. We work with her often, work with the Southeastern Council often, and it'll be really great to hear what's going on the ground just down south of us here, and I'm sure that this will be quite instructive for many of you on the call. So I'm just going to take a quick few minutes to set the context for this webinar. So it's no secret to anyone that we are in election season, and elections are certainly top of mind. Looking forward to September, we probably will not see a whole lot of legislative movement in the next couple of months. The Congressman can certainly take exception to what I'm saying when we hear from him, but that doesn't mean that things aren't happening. There are lots and lots of discussions that are taking place with staff and with members of Congress that help to shape and frame what will lie ahead once we get beyond the general elections. I would anticipate we will see activity after the elections in a lame duck session. We've certainly had experience over the past many, many years with having activity in November and December. So I think in the olden days, I've got my air quotes going on here, in the olden days, this period leading up through the election and the end of the year, you know, not much may have happened, but it does happen. So we all need to stay attentive and
Congressman,
ready to go.
Okay.
So
they get to me immediately, but you might just tell them they told me how to get off the phone.
Okay, I'll let them know if they can't hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congressman?
I'm going to move ahead now and discuss tax reform and what might be on the horizon. Now, depending on who you talk to in the tax world, they may say tax reform will be immediately after in 2017 once we get back from the general elections. Others may say it'll be a little further down the pike. But at some point along the road, and you know I often feel like Chicken Little, tax reform will come. So for right now, we're keeping an eye on all of the different pieces, puzzles and pieces. One thing that I want you to all know is that we are keeping an eye on what the presidential candidates are saying as well. Now we don't get a lot of detail from them, but we are looking at the proposals that they have put forward. And I just want to raise a couple of things. Not only do we take a look at some of those provisions that traditionally you all know that we talk about, and those would be things like the charitable deduction. We have the candidate Trump came out yesterday with a tax plan that may preserve some incentives such as the charitable deduction. We've heard from candidate Clinton around what might happen there, but we don't know specifics. So we'll keep an eye out. We talk to their policy people. We see what's coming. But really more importantly, we want to look at the overall policy objectives, or maybe not more importantly, but in addition, we look at the overall policy objectives. And in a framework where we may see comprehensive tax reform, it's very, very important that we're all thinking about the following. Is there an opportunity to advance incentives for charitable giving? Maybe as we know them now, maybe things that we are just dreaming about. Can we expand current incentives? Can we maybe think of ways to suggest new creative ways to incentivize charitable giving that would boost giving, and incentives that might expand beyond the current set of taxpayers who can take advantage of the current framework? So those are some of the things that we take a look at. In addition to that, what are the challenges in both individual income tax provisions and corporate tax policies? So we work with a lot of our colleagues. I know Adina's probably thinking about a lot of these things, and so we're really taking a step back to understand, look across the board and see where we have opportunities. Now moving to Speaker Ryan's blueprint, one thing that we're taking a look at in that, again, beyond the specific language, and it is somewhat general because it's a blueprint, is that this is moving toward a consumption tax. And Chairman Kevin Brady, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, is lockstep with Mr. Ryan in this idea. So conceptually, what would a consumption tax mean for all of us? Now moving to corporate, some of you may have heard about this concept of corporate integration, which all these corporate tax proposals are really focused first and foremost on trying to bring back U.S. corporations who've taken their operations overseas. It's really an effort to try to bring that back to U.S. soil, and there are lots and lots of different ways in which to do that. I know candidate Clinton has talked about this. Candidate Trump has talked about it. Chairman Hatch's plan has captured some attention, this corporate integration idea, because it would shift the way in which dividends and interest are handled. And when we know more and see an actual plan, because this has only been a concept, we have not seen anything on paper, I guarantee you that we will be doing a webinar or another educational opportunity to let you know how this works. But there will be, or there could be, I'm not saying there will, there could be some implications for tax-exempt organizations. So stay tuned for that one. And then finally, we are looking again, I mentioned the candidates, but looking at the party's platforms and just looking conceptually at what's going on. So if you're wondering what the council is doing on tax reform right now, it is both at the macro level of these big picture concepts and looking at the micro level, the individual provisions that either are in these things or could be in these things, and of course working very, very collaboratively with our friends kind of across the spectrum of the Charitable Giving Coalition, and others, also thinking of who are the other stakeholders in our space and what might their postures be around this. So more to come on all of that, but that is the context for where things are right now. Now, I'm going to go a little out of our original order, and I'm going to jump to the Congressman. Again, we are thrilled to have Congressman Steve Cohen with us. I'm sorry, did he have to jump off the call?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jackson from Congressman Steve Cohen's office. Unfortunately, the Congressman was calling from his cell phone in his seat in the airplane, and he was asked to turn his cell phone off because they were taxiing on the runway. But
they're getting off.
Yes, and he is sorry that he had to leave mid-introduction, but he did want to say that you know, he's really proud to be part of this call, and that he thanks everyone for letting him take part for at least the first part of it, and that he told me that there are a number of organizations in his district that help constituents in and around Shelby County and Western Tennessee, and when these NGOs, these small businesses come to the Washington, D.C., and they sit down with him, it makes a difference, and it does help him make a decision that's right for his constituency. And I'm sure he could get into much more detail than I could, but he did want to say thank you very much for letting him be part of the phone call.
Well, Jackson, thank you so much. And so what we're going to do is try to get the Congressman onto a future call, because we would be thrilled to have him participate and talk a little bit about kind of his interests, how he sees charitable giving, and how he might think about being a champion for some of the causes that we have. So I'm kind of holding you to that here on the webinar live. But
well, that would be absolutely great. You know, I'm sure he would look forward to having another discussion with you guys again. And feel free, anytime you guys want to call our office, reach out again. You know, he really does care a lot about this issue, and he really wants to make sure this is, you know, this is something he cares about.
Excellent, excellent. And Adina, I'm sure you're taking notes down there in the Southeastern Council. So again, Jackson, thank you so much. Please extend thanks to the Congressman on our behalf, and we will be reaching out to him as well. And with that, I am going to turn to my colleague, Hadar, and let you take it from here.
Great, thank you, Sue. And Jackson, again, please send my thanks to Congressman Cohen for his leadership on this issue, for his membership in the Philanthropy Caucus, and all the work he does with us. So thank you, everybody. It's very hot where I am here at the beach, and so this is a great excuse to be inside for a little while, so I appreciate that opportunity. I want to walk us through a little bit more of the why and the how. Sue really went down the list of the policy issues and the things that, you know, we're looking at in Washington and talking with congressional staff and members about. But one of the things that I'm hoping collectively we can take out of this call, and unfortunately, you know, we were hoping to hear this from the Congressman, so I will do my best to fill this void, but is really a deeper understanding of why it's so important. And, you know, we who are in Washington, and also I think people, you know, who meet with legislators in the home districts or who come to DC to meet, you know, we sit down, we talk to our members of Congress, we talk with the staff, but what you can see when you're there on the day-to-day is the unbelievable amount of input that they are getting from business organizations, from other nonprofit organizations, from constituents, from all sorts of entities on every issue that they care about. And you can see with members like Congressman Cohen, who've chosen to be part of the Philanthropy Caucus, who've chosen to, you know, prioritize this, that a major part of the reason that they do is because they hear from their constituents. They hear from people who they care about in their districts. And when you don't have that, what you get is, at worst, they're hearing from other people who might have different views on issues that you care about and are going to then be more likely to follow those recommendations. Or even if that's not the case, you get a deprioritization. So for us at the Council, our core policy work is really about the business of philanthropy. It's about those tax policy issues that Sue addressed. And I can't begin to tell you how many times we go in and meet with congressional staffers, or occasionally even with members of Congress who are frankly unfamiliar with the issues that we're talking about. This is not something that dominates the headlines. It's not something that they automatically get thousands of calls in their districts and know they have to pay attention to. So as a sector, if we want them to understand our priorities and understand what we need from them so that we can best partner and best achieve the goals that we set out, we've got to be there, and we've got to build these relationships, and we've got to tell them. So I want to take a few more minutes and highlight a few specific vehicles that we use for doing so, and then I think we'll keep going. So you can see on our lovely slides here, first of all, some pictures. Both myself and my colleague Stephanie Powers spent the full week in Cleveland during the Republican National Convention, and then followed that up with the week in Philadelphia during the Democratic Convention. You can see lovely pictures of us there with Governor John Kasich, Congressman Kevin McCarthy, the second-ranking House Republican, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, also with other civic leaders like Dr. Cornell Brooks, the head of the NAACP. And on the one hand, being there at those conventions, it's not, there was not a tremendous amount of time spent in those cities in the convention overall discussing our tax policy issues, although we had some good conversations. But the purpose for us being there, the reason for us being there, is in order to be able to have these conversations, to talk to these people, to build these relationships. Because again, if you walk in cold, if you've never met that person, if you haven't worked to build that relationship, the capacity that you have to engage with them, to make sure they're really taking your views to heart, and hopefully ultimately to get them to vote the way you want, is far, far more limited. And these pictures are just a few examples of the opportunities we got there to represent the council and really to represent the sector. And similarly, you've heard us, both Sue and I now mention the Philanthropy Caucus. This is a vehicle that the council has really helped create and lead and is now revitalizing. We've got both House and Senate members coming together around a Congressional Philanthropy Caucus whose goal is for members and staffers to be able to learn about the issues that we care about as a sector. And I think this is frankly for them the reason that they do it, for them to be able to connect to the people doing and leading this work in their districts and in their states. And almost without exception, as we've talked to members of Congress about joining the caucus, and they've asked what it entails and basically what are the benefits of it, unlike some other organizations in other sectors, we don't have a PAC, we're not supporting political candidates, but what we're doing and what they're finding incredibly valuable is really connecting people to the philanthropic leaders in their sector, in their state, and in their districts. And that really leads into what I think is the most important piece of laying the groundwork for a sector-wide political voice. And I say political voice knowing that sometimes that language is uncomfortable for people, but I think it's important for us to understand what that means and doesn't mean. It doesn't mean it's partisan. It doesn't mean it's supporting parties or candidates, but what it means is we have a robust political system and process, and we want to be part of that discussion. And in order to be part of it, you have to first and foremost not shy away from it. You have to be willing to reach out. You have to be willing to engage. And in the districts, you've got August recess opportunities, which Serena is going to speak to shortly. But more than that, year-round, you have opportunities to engage with your elected officials, whether that's members of Congress, House members, Senate members, maybe it's governors or state and local officials, where you can invite them to your annual dinner. You can invite them to the opening of the new service site that you've been supporting. You can engage with them on an ongoing way so that they understand what it can be achieved through our partnerships, through these public-private partnerships, and they can understand what are the dangers to the sector that frankly would reduce our capacity to reach our goals and to fulfill the to fulfill the priorities that we've really set out. I want to take just a moment on the next slide there, which is our 2016 philanthropy platform. This is actually a special folder that we made and delivered nearly 1,000 copies of at both the Republican and Democratic conventions. You can see in some of the pictures the members of Congress are holding them up. We shared these with members along with very lovely Council on Foundation pins so that they could understand in a pocket foldout in 30 seconds, what are those priorities? What are those things that we care about? Because again, we don't have as a sector right now the kind of instantaneous identity where if you go and talk to a member of Congress, they automatically know what you care about. They automatically know what your priorities are, what the things are that you want to see them do, or the things you want to see them push back. And the only way we get to that level of comfort with them and that level of their knowledge about the sector is really prioritizing building and strengthening those relationships. And so many organizations that are doing great work around this country are putting tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in many cases into supporting key issues, are supporting charities and nonprofits that then will speak to members of Congress, will educate them, but are in many cases missing the opportunity to raise our sector's own voice on the issues that you care about. And again, for us at the Council, we stick just to the tax policy issues, but for those of you around the country, there's no legal distinction, there's no reason that you can't do that, as well as speaking to elected officials about whatever the priorities are of your foundation. So I think I actually want to stop there and make sure we have time to go to Adina and Serena and then open for questions. Hello, so let's hand over to Adina.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you guys for having me on today. This is really a timely discussion, and I really appreciate Congressman Cohen making his best effort to join us for the call because he definitely represents members in our region. I bring greetings from Southeastern Council of Foundations, our President Janine Lee, and the entire staff here, and really happy to share my thoughts about relationship building in the states and back in the district. SECF is a membership association, much like the Council on Foundation, and we have a diverse group of members. Our region, it has a rich history of philanthropy, but sometimes, our priorities with our foundations are split across issue areas and place, and it isn't always so clear to members why they should be connecting with members of Congress. So I try to set a little bit of context and letting people know the importance of these connections and the relationships that we make with our members of Congress. The membership aspect of our associations really is built around connections, and I think it translates well to the relationships that we build on the Hill and with our representatives in the district. The stories that I've gathered from my time here with Southeastern Council of Foundations from members and the connections I've actually witnessed them have with their representatives really affirms for me the importance of these relationships. I wanted to extend a thank you to Congressman Cohen because he is a perfect example of how and why we should be engaging with elected officials. The congressman is a philanthropist. Many of you may not know that, but he actively supports the work of Community Foundation of Greater Memphis and participates in their giving circle. So he's worked closely with a lot of foundations in the community and provided some support and guidance for major federal initiatives that are coming to Memphis. So that kind of stuff doesn't go unnoticed. Our members in Tennessee really have, high regard for Congressman Cohen because of his engagement with the sector. And they greatly appreciate it. They wanted me to make sure when they saw his name pop up across their screens when this invitation went out, they wanted me to make sure that I did thank the congressman. So not only are our elected officials really involved in each state as community members, they see the parks, they see the programs and foundation work that you all are doing and how you contribute to their district. But like Congressman Cohen, some of them are also philanthropists. I've discovered, with attending visits with members, with our members here, foundation representatives, that this isn't unique to Congressman Cohen. There have been instances where we've sat down with representatives and learned that their sons have private foundations, or that their wife runs a community foundation. And that's something that's been true of a few of the representatives from the South, and I'm sure it would be true for representatives in other parts of the country. So even on that level, you know, that making sure that we can make that connection with members who have an interest in philanthropy, have an interest in the community, and we have some common ground already. So on that level of connection, even when our elected officials are connected to the foundation world in some way through their affiliations or through their familiar relationships, they may not understand the role that that foundations play, or to the extent that policy changes would impact the operations of a foundation. So being that link, foundation representatives in each state on the ground can really provide that context and be that link for how policy might affect the sector, and also help educate members about your day-to-day operations. And for those who are members of Congress who don't understand, like Hador mentioned, there are a lot of people who really don't know what we do, what the sector is about. They hear foundation or they hear philanthropy and they kind of go to this one place in their mind. It presents a unique opportunity for us to connect the dots for some people, to connect what they're seeing in their district, both some of the issues that they're having in their district and some of the general improvements that might be taking place across the state, and to show how foundations are supporting those efforts in the community, I think is really, really important. So again, the relationships really help draw these links to the connections that members may already have with philanthropy, but also to how any policy decision that they're making could impact foundation operations and your ability to support communities. So those are like the two key pieces that I wanted to make sure to highlight when I talked about this, the need for the relationship, and why we should be committed to making sure that we do build relationships. So as members of Council on Foundation and Southeastern Council of Foundations and our staff have really been connecting with members of Congress on the Hill. We've been doing so during signature events like Foundation on the Hill, which took place in April, and a recent DC fly-in opportunity that happened in June. And we're certainly, you know, interested in continuing those efforts. But the point that I wanted to really drive home here is that we don't want to be one-dimensional in our approach. We need as much help as we can with trying to reaffirm our message and make sure that we're being consistent and speaking in a unified voice. So this is where individuals who can't make it to DC come in very handy, or even if you invite your member to your site or to have a meeting when they're back in the district, this is where it becomes really important, because you can tie the work that we're doing on the Hill and the work that you may be doing on the Hill back to the district and things that are happening on the ground. So recess opportunities that Serena is going to speak to a little bit about, the Advocacy Tool Kit, really do provide us with an opportunity. You know, we have August and October this year as recess opportunities, and it's a time for us to meet with elected officials when they're home, and they can really see the work that you're doing and really connect with it in a more direct way. So you can educate them about the tax bills that we've been talking about throughout the year and things that we were championing on Foundations on the Hill, but you can also share, you know, the work on the ground, your projects that you're doing in their district, some of the grantees that you might be supporting throughout the state. And true, we don't expect policy movement at the moment, but the goal is the relationship. If we build that relationship, we'll have some likely outcomes. There'll be a few results we can anticipate. We'll know, one, that policymakers are going to see foundations as valuable resources. They'll connect your program that you're funding, the research that you've commissioned, the engagement you have with communities. They'll begin to see that as useful information for them in their service to communities. Then you'll get this second effect. You will have opportunities to become partners in strengthening the communities that you already support. So again, identifying those shared priorities and discussing opportunities and identifying opportunities for government and the private sector to partner. That's something that I think Congressman Cohen provides a great example of, how he's really been able to guide and coach private foundations about these major federal initiatives that are coming to his district, coming to Memphis area. And lastly, the thing that I see is, you go into an office, you state your talking points, your reason for supporting, encouraging your member to support a particular piece of legislation, but they really don't have a connection to you or to your work. So it could sound like Charlie Brown, blah, 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 coming in their ear. So when you see these policies and you have this relationship, when you go into an office with someone you have a relationship with and you talk to them from that standpoint, then they begin to see, the impact of their decision making and how the policies truly intersect with your operations and the way that you are able to work in the communities that they also serve. So this is a great opportunity for us to really make policy movement. So we're building relationships, we're creating partners in the community, we're becoming resources in the community when we have these opportunities, and really this is our goal here as membership associations, to encourage members to meet with members of Congress so that we are doing this more often. And some practical ways that Southeastern Council of Foundations will be taking this on in August is through programming and supporting our members through their visits. The first programming opportunity I wanted to highlight is one that we'll have in Alabama next week. We refer to it as Foundations 101, but we've partnered with the Council on Foundations with these field visits in the past, where we create a lunch program and we introduce policymakers to the field. They can come learn about local foundations and giving in the community and get a better sense of some of the programming that might be taking place, where grants are going in the state. The second way that SCCF is supporting our members is by providing them with some of the very same content that you'll have access to through the Council on Foundations Advocacy Tool Kit, and really supporting our members in their in-district meetings by offering those talking points, any fact sheets that we've worked on with the Foundation Center, and giving our members the opportunity to share their stories. So we help them set up the meetings that they may need and contact their members of Congress. And it's something else that I wanted to kind of draw a connection to is our time at Foundations on the Hill has been very fruitful for some of our members who initiated the conversations at Foundations on the Hill, extended an invite when we were in those meetings saying, hey, when you're back in the district, please reach out to us. We would love to meet. We would love to, bring you to our site or a site of one of our grantees. And in fact, we've had 2 of our members contact us this week saying, hey, we didn't think it would happen, but our members contacted us and they want to set up meetings, and now we need information. So that's what I'm in the process of doing, helping facilitate some of the programming and supporting our members in their visits. So I encourage you all to go ahead and set up those meetings and site visits to your foundation or one of the projects you support in your representative's district to illustrate the impact of philanthropy and to take the first step towards building those key relationships. That common ground and those shared priorities are, just the base for us being able to impact some of the legislative pieces that we have an interest in. Your relationships really can serve the field in a number of ways. Imagine how much more effective SCCF and Council on Foundations as membership associations could be if our messaging were more effective, if we knew which representatives were engaged in philanthropy in their local communities. And with you building relationships, we can really have that type of insight and connection to help all of us, make the case for philanthropy at the federal level. And that's what I'm most hopeful about. And for, we're getting closer to tax reform, so I just want us to stay diligent and use our best efforts to educate our members when they're back home. All right.
Great. Adina, thank you so very much for sharing your expertise with us. It was really just a great series of examples about what we can do in the public policy and advocacy space when we are organized and focused on it. So thank you. Before we turn to Serena and dig into the August Recess Toolkit, I thought maybe we could see if we've gotten a question or two that's come in, which is really also turning to Serena.
Yes, so we have received one question. One of the participants asked if we could elaborate on what the Philanthropy Caucuses do throughout the year. I think a lot of people hear about the Philanthropy Caucus during Philanthropy Week, but there's some interest in knowing a little bit more about what the regular activities are of these caucuses and sort of the purpose they serve beyond just Foundations on the Hill or Philanthropy Week.
Great. So I will. Adina, you want to get in on that?
Oh, absolutely. So the Philanthropy Caucus has really gained some momentum within the last year and a half. The goal is to have programming for members of the caucus to educate them about philanthropy, really as an educational opportunity and a networking opportunity, and to connect them with members in their local communities who serve the sector. So it's an ongoing opportunity. It's not nonpartisan, and we're not shopping any policy in those caucus meetings, but it's an opportunity to educate about some of the different initiatives going on in the sector. So one example would be around the Community Foundation National Standards. That was an educational opportunity that happened during this year. Council on Foundations held a meeting where they were able to provide some context and information about national standards, so that all of our members who were participating were aware that there is this resource that community foundations have. There are these governance pieces that are in place. So it's an educational opportunity and an opportunity for members of Congress to connect with local foundation representatives.
Absolutely.
And just to build off of a little bit what Adina was saying as well, we use the Philanthropy Caucuses all the time. It's really, to her point, they serve as the center for educating members of Congress on the issues that impact philanthropy, but also just bouncing ideas off of them, making sure they're in the loop with what's happening in the philanthropic world. Oftentimes the Philanthropy Caucus really serves as a nexus between what's happening in these members of Congress district and what's happening here on the Hill, because there is sometimes a disconnect. But they circulate Dear Colleague letters, letting others in Congress know sort of what's going on. Just last week I was in touch with the staffers of the co-chairs in both the House and Senate about setting up a seminar for staffers during this recess to educate them on the very basics of philanthropy. What is the difference between a C3 and a C4? What is the difference between a private foundation and a public charity? And so, they really are amplifying our voice on the Hill. We go up and we can, educate them on the issues that matter to us, but they really amplify that by talking with their colleagues and others in Congress to really get the message out there.
Thanks, Sunan. The last piece I would add around the caucus is that while it has, for a number of years been the council really helping drive this process, we've actually really extended an invitation and opened that both to our colleagues at the independent sector and the Philanthropy Roundtable as well to join us in engaging with and through the caucus. And I think we're going to see more events in this coming year that will include, content and input and engagement with the council and our members, as well as with our colleagues at Independent Sector and the Roundtable. With that, Serena, why don't we hand it back over to you to run through some of the highlights of the Activate in August initiative.
Thanks, Hador. So I think Adina made a really great case for why it's important for us to engage during this recess, the opportunity that it presents. And the Advocacy Tool Kit is really the resource to make that happen. So it provides several different buckets of resources, if you will. So the very basic how-to, this is, as simple as which staffer in your member of Congress's office do you reach out to if you want to schedule a meeting, versus who might be the tax policy expert in that office if you want to connect with someone on tax policy. In addition to that, though, we've talked about tax policy a lot on this call, but certainly we understand that all of you are working on issues that are pertinent to your mission. And so that might be education, that might be health, that might be, social justice issues. And certainly you can connect with your members of Congress on those issues too. And so, this resource, this how-to, will guide you to who would be best in your member of Congress's office to connect with, to really to discuss those issues in depth. We talked with our Public Policy Committee as we were updating this toolkit, as we do most years, and a lot of the feedback we were receiving was, particularly foundations that are just kind of dipping their toe in the water with getting involved in this advocacy space, have a tough time making the case to their board for why they should get involved in advocacy and lobbying issues. So we created this bucket of resources called Why Engage, which is intended to help foundation leaders convince or make the case for their board for why advocacy and lobbying is such an important tool in the toolbox that foundations can use to achieve their mission and goals. Additionally, if you would like some guidance on specific asks, specific pieces of legislation that are out there right now, we had a question here about what the specific legislative priorities are for the sector for the end of the year. As many of you know, we don't need to fight again at the end of this year for the extenders as we have in the past, but there are still important pieces of legislation out there that impact our sector. So the Senate has the Charity Act out there that was introduced by Senators Thune and Wyden. The House has a couple of bills out there right now that certainly would support the work of our sector and, help us achieve the goals we're trying to achieve in our communities. So all of that information can be found there in the Asks bucket. And then the Know Your Stuff is really just a resource to you if you want to learn more about the tax policy that impacts our sector and kind of the nitty-gritty, maybe a little bit more wonky stuff if you want to dive into that. But certainly we would encourage you to use this as a resource as you're engaging and building these relationships with your members of Congress and your lawmakers. And in addition to that, I think this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, any of us here on the policy team at the council, and certainly Adina, for her membership, we are here and we encourage you to reach out to us if you're struggling with sort of how to get started with this, or just looking for some guidance on something specific. We can absolutely help point you in the right direction for whatever you're looking for. And then the last thing I would say would be just to encourage you all to tell us about your experiences, share your experiences. If you have a Twitter account for your foundation, ask your member of Congress if they'll take a picture with you. Put it up on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, whatever types of social media accounts you manage, because not only does it help us know what you're doing so that we can support your efforts, but a lot of the times it helps inform your grantees or people that you work with and to to show what you're doing and might encourage them to step up to the plate and get involved too. So again, please feel free to connect with us on any of these things, and we are happy to help.
Great. Thank you very much, Serena. I want folks to take a minute, think about whether you've got any questions, particularly around the Activate in August work, or any of what Adina shared or what I shared. And if so, please shoot an email in or type in through the webinar and let us know. And I just want to add to that we've got the resources for the August in Action. We've got resources you will see on our website and out through our Twitter and Facebook page and all the rest. But I want everybody to know that most importantly, is that you've got us as a staff here, myself, Serena, the rest of our policy team, Sue, and others. And the best part of our days is when we get calls, when we get emails from people who are interested in either learning more and engaging and figuring out how your foundation can raise your voice in the advocacy space, or even better, when we're hearing from folks who are sharing with us what they have been doing and the successes and the relationships that you've built. So you will all be hearing from us as we move forward, and because one of the things that we need to know in order to be most effective as representatives for the sector is what are those relationships. So if you're connected to your senators, to your congressmen, to your governors or state and local elected officials, we want to know about that so that we can make sure that when we're talking to them in Washington, that we're referencing those relationships, that we're bringing you into those conversations, that we're doing the best job we can to really be a megaphone for you and your voices and your work around the country. So please be in touch, whether you've got information you want to share with us or questions and things we can help you with. And that's it. I will turn back to Serena to see if we got any more questions in.
Hi, Hadar. Yes, we did get another question asking what work we've been doing, and Adina, I think you can chime in on this as well, but what work we've been doing to further the passage of the Charity Act and whether or not we expect that to be passed before the end of the year.
Great. Adina, how about I'll kick off and then hand that to you. Sound good?
Great.
Okay, so I'll take that backward and look at whether or not we expect it to be passed by the end of the year. If I'm forced to go up or down, I think the answer to that is no, because I actually don't expect almost anything to be passed by the end of the year. We don't know for sure when the Senate is going to be, well, when the House and Senate will be back in, and if so, what are they going to deem urgent and take up in an election year in particular. The fall agendas are very, very sparse, and we don't know yet whether there'll be a lame duck session, and if there is a lame duck session, again, whether things will be taken up there. And then I would just add to it that since there is a pretty strong understanding that we're going to be looking at a comprehensive tax reform effort next year, I think that makes it much less likely that people would prioritize pushing that legislation this year. And I think that everybody involved in this, some of the members of Congress, the supporting organizations, knew that going in, and that the goal and the work that we've done around the charity bill and around the other pieces of legislation this year has been about building and demonstrating that support, about getting people on the record. Federal policy work is a long-term game, and there are many, many of the important signature pieces of legislation out there that take years to get done. And you introduce it one year and you get nowhere, and you introduce it a second year and you get a few co-sponsors. You introduce it a third year and you get a hearing. You introduce it a fourth year and you get a vote, and you actually pass it your fifth year or your sixth year or your eighth year. Now, I think we have a very good chance of getting those key provisions included in comprehensive tax reform next year. So that's my political analysis on it, and I'll turn that back to Adina for her thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I completely agree, Hadar. I was just going to mention that to me, the bill had always been about building the support. And when we think about support and the co-sponsors, I think it's going to be important to kind of keep them engaged around this topic as tax reform is developed. So we have the blueprint, Paul Ryan's blueprint. We have the legislation that's been co-sponsored by a number of senators. So just kind of continue to make the connections for them, where we might see some issues with the blueprint, where we might see some opportunities with the blueprint, and kind of doing that side-by-side comparison, I think could be helpful for those that are a little bit more astute. For those who really don't understand our issues, I think it is a good starting place. It helps build some foundation. That I think the two provisions that are included in the Charity Act really help us speak to our work and how we do it from the community foundation standpoint, and how we do it from the private foundation standpoint, and they really help explain some of the different operational pieces. So to that end, I think we could still use the Charity Act as a way to communicate about the work and the operations and how some of these policies will impact foundations, impact the support that we're able to provide communities. So those would be my observations about the status of the legislation, where it's moving, how we can use it and best position ourselves in conversation when talking about legislation.
Great, thank you, Adina. Serena, do we have a last question?
Nope, I think that's it for the moment.
Okay, well, in that case, I will thank Adina very much for joining us and sharing your expertise with everybody. And thank you to everybody who joined the call. And again, as Sue mentioned at the start of the call, if you have further questions, please email, call, tweet, Facebook, Instagram, whatever you can come up with, send a Raven. We would be happy to answer them and happy to talk with you about the August Toolkit and all of this work going forward. So thank you very much.
Hey, set your meetings, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Bye, everyone.